increased food security. So, growth in the Arab world is not necessarily pro-poor, but growth is not entirely in the hands of the government. So what about government expenditures? In fact, government spending as a share of GDP is the highest in the Arab region. Arab governments' total spending on agriculture, education, health, infrastructure, social protection, and other sectors averages around 27% of GDP. This compares with an average of 16 to 18% in Latin America, the Caribbean, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the Asia-Pacific regions. But this size of the spending does not in itself say much about the efficiency of this spending. In fact, the relationship between public spending and growth is very different in the Arab world than in the rest of the world. Research by the World Bank shows that spending $1 additional by a government in the Arab region yields only about half the growth of $1 spent in the rest of the world. This raises serious concerns regarding the effectiveness of public spending in the Arab world and shows that there is real room for significant improvement in terms of government efficiency and productivity and in terms of better use of available scarce resources. A detailed look at the World Bank research shows two important factors behind the poor effectiveness of public spending in the Arab world. The first factor is education spending, which in the study for the rest of the world is a major determinant of growth. But education spending in the Arab world as a whole has somehow a negative effect on growth, raising really alarming questions about the quality of education systems and the effectiveness of public service delivery in our region. In addition, it seems that education in the Arab world no longer rewards quality and is not adapting to the need of the market, and therefore in some instances is contributing further to unemployment. According to 2009 UNDP report, education quality and type do not match labor market demand, especially in vocational fields. The second factor, more closely related to our topic today, is the large amount of subsidies that feature in Arab public spending. Fuel subsidy and in some countries food subsidies are often higher than the targeted social spending. Let's take, for example, two Arab Spring countries in Egypt and Syria, food and fuel subsidies accounting for about 20% of public spending are more than twofold higher than spending on social protection programs and health combined. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, the word reforms has not always been used or implemented properly in the Arab world, because policies has often been planned and implemented top-down. They were never properly explained to the public. They often been half-baked in their region, in their design, and in many cases, they benefited only the few. But today, it is high time for real deep and effective reforms, because simply there are no other credible alternatives. The brave young men and women who took to the streets in Cairo, Tunis, Benghazi, Syria, and other Arab Spring cities are expecting more freedom and participation, but also a better life and promising prospects. To their bad luck, these events have been launched and continue to take place in the midst of global economic crisis still unfolding, particularly in the US and Europe, which are the usual sources of trade and external financial support to the Arab region. In addition to the limited scope of foreign support, the increases in public sector wages and higher subsidies before and after the Arab Spring movement is leaving governments in a very difficult fiscal situation. The repercussions of the Arab Spring on the balance of payments in many countries has reduced any room of maneuver that policymakers could have. Of course, had the Arab Spring taken place later, the cost could have been even much higher. These constraints leave to us very little options. But from the jaws of the challenges, we should snatch the opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, let me sum up. Let me sum up and summarize with a proposal of a plan with 3 tracks. The first track is to design and implement a common Arab economic integration agenda that starts with the launching of cross-border mega projects in the key sectors of transport, power, energy, and water. These projects should be financially viable and be attractive to the issue of cost recovery so that institutional investors could actively take part of them. They should bring the Arab world closer and reduce the cost of production and distribution through efficiency gains. These mega projects should be accompanied by tax breaks and other fiscal incentives, and as well by more conducive business environment that would make it attractive to the private sector and allow it to create synergies which would trickle down and help generate the jobs that are needed by our economies and ultimately help lift people out of poverty. But for that reason to happen, a second track needs to be pursued in parallel by the governments of the countries that are undertaking a transition, or those who want to take part of the promises of tomorrow. It consists of pushing ahead with needed reforms at the institutional, legal, regulatory levels, as well as those related to the judiciary. The creation of the proper investment climate, and above, allow for the implementation of all the governance issues. Progress on the infrastructure front should be complemented by progress on the suprastructure front, something that the Arab countries have always been weak at. Together with the stabilization of the security situation, the normalization of the democratic process that reduces uncertainty in the long run. These structural reforms will contribute to stronger investments in labor-intensive sectors such as manufacturing, and with time will lead to stronger investments in the high value-added services. These sectors will generate large-scale employment, absorb the educated youth into the economy, and lift people out of poverty, hence fostering food security. The third track is to rethink and implement a new approach to social safety nets that ease the transition and protect the most vulnerable at these difficult times in our society. As I mentioned previously, not just growth in the Arab world, but also government spending is not effectively pro-poor. Probably we need to learn from the experience of other countries, such as Brazil, for instance, on how optimal design of social safety nets, especially the Bolsa Familia, has not just protected the poor from adverse economic conditions, but actually lifted masses out of poverty and contributed directly to higher growth and stronger investments through the higher additional purchasing power of the emerging middle class.